Welcome to Shaken and Disturbed, everyone. If you're seeing us for the first time, these backgrounds look, yes, odd and totally normal. But if this is not your first time, then you've noticed that we have different
Oh,
backgrounds. We'll get to that in one moment. But welcome to Shaken and Disturbed. I am Father God Daryn Carp here with my lovely podcast partner in crime, Mother God John Thrasher. And John, yes, is
freaking
hyperventilated,
out.
freaking out because
Yeah.
we have brand new backgrounds that we're bringing to you. They're still in the process. We're still going to fill our shelves with some things. Yes,
I know mine's a little like
John's
barren,
fat
but
cat is like full. My doggo is she's just perfect.
I just love
Um,
that we have our children on the show now, both of
I-
ours.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
just love that you have me and I have Andy. So we each have a gay, a
We each
different
have a
gay. We
gay.
we each have a gay.
I figured if we're gonna both have pictures like in our video backgrounds or whatever, that we don't both need to have a picture of both of us. So I was like, let's just keep it, you know,
Although
one gay at a time is what I'm
Magic's
trying
so
to say.
fat, he's photos kind of encroaching in on ours, which is fine. He's
He
allowed.
looks like Godzilla.
He, I told you, he looks like a cat in a fat suit.
Yeah,
He
Darren
looks
says this
like
on NMR.
he's,
Go listen to NMR. It was a really fun one this week. Darren makes the point that he looks like a cat in a fat suit, and I had
and he
never heard that before
does.
because Darren says his head is normal, but the
It's
rest of his
totally
body
normal.
is not.
It's extra
So
large. It's extra, extra large. And then, of
yeah,
course, we have our
he's slimmed
sussy
down.
radish
Lamp.
board,
Oh, and the board, yes.
lamp and board for those sussy radishes. But okay, everyone, we wanted to talk to you. This is actually, we've been doing some documentaries lately, and just want to say
A
big
lot.
thank you to Netflix for giving
Yes,
us early
thank you.
access to this. This is one of the reasons we were embargoed until Monday, February
That's
17th. This is
right.
why it's coming out a day later than we normally do. We are reviewing the three-part Netflix documentary, American Murder, Gabby Petito, this week. I Let me just say, I believe, I want to say a month ago, sent me the trailer. It
Yeah.
dropped for this, and subsequently it's been on Netflix. I've seen it. I was really excited to cover this case because, for all these reasons, it really happened when we were launching Shaken and Disturbed.
Yeah, that's right.
It kind of swept the nation. This involves police. It involves cover ups from families. It involves sort of this nationwide social media gathering search as well, which was,
Hmm.
really interesting. Sort of these, like a new wave crime in some sort of way. It was a fascinating story. I know someone who was familially related to this case. So just at the time, thinking about that we were going to see a documentary, it was here it is finally. And this
Yeah.
case didn't happen too long ago. I mean, a little over 3 years ago,
Yeah,
three and a
I
half years
know.
ago.
We were just talking before we started the show that it feels like it was just a couple years ago, but it's now been, yeah, like Darren said, three, whatever, three and a half.
Yeah.
Not to gloss over this and not to pry by any means, Darren, but you did just mention you have a connection to this case without telling us what anything about that. Do you, what can you share with us? Like, what do you like? How connected? Because I feel like the listener may have just heard that and want to know like what that means
Yeah, I
specifically.
can't say specifically how it's to the Petito family. I just have to keep it as anonymous as possible. But
Sure.
very close person in my
Gotcha.
life
Okay.
is related to that family. Um,
Gotcha.
that's
Okay.
what I can
That's all
say.
we
But
need to say. That's fine.
and it's funny because like subsequently, talk to them here and there, like what's the
Right.
update or this and that. And
Mm,
so we'll get to sort of the settlement that happened.
yes.
But when the settlement happened, I remember saying like they just settled with Brian's
I didn't
family.
even know that happened,
Um,
but yeah, we will get to that.
yeah,
Yes.
I kind of felt like for as crazy as this story is, which we're gonna re-get
Mm-hmm.
into, after that craze of it sort of died down. It like
Oh,
they weren't setting
100%.
really
Yeah.
a precedent for it. It wasn't like, well, Brian Laundrie's family, blah 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 blah. Like you don't really hear people talk about it too much anymore. And
Yeah,
I'm
you
glad sort of
don't.
the family has kept this legacy alive.
Yeah.
Because as
Well,
we'll see, there should maybe be potential people arrested for things that they are not arrested for. So
yeah,
we'll get
more on
into it.
that in just a few moments here. But
Yeah.
Darren, you and I do also, we were just talking about when this all went down a couple of years ago, 2021. We had with some previous work on this, not just from Shaken and Disturbed. When this was happening, this case was unfolding over the course of a couple of weeks. I was working at Space Station Productions, which produced the ID Investigation Discovery special that Darren was on. So it was like this weird, like true crime thing where And it was kind of like, you and I both met and started our careers in true crime at Oxygen, the network at NBC Universal,
Hmm.
where kind of in a similar way, like I was a staff member and you were like talent, that we sort of came together and became producers and talent on Martinis and Murder. It was like interesting that we kind of copy pasted that scenario to some degree
Yeah.
over to a different network and a different production company. But
And and that Gabby Petito special was really fun to
yeah,
do. I believe there was like 5 or 6 people on the panel. I
that's
was sort of
right. That was
representing the social
cool.
media side of it, but we recorded it at a time before we even knew where Brian was or what had happened to Brian.
That's
It was
right.
still in that, which we learn in this documentary, almost 40 days of him missing, which was, I don't remember it being that long,
Yeah,
but they had
same.
shot this special during that time. And I remember, pretty high end people were
Yeah,
on
for
this
sure.
special, but I remember kind of being the only person to say like, hey, like technically he's still innocent. Like the case had not been
Yeah,
I mean, the case still hasn't been adjudicated, but I think we have a pretty good idea about what happened to
of
Gabby in
course.
terms
Right.
of Brian. And Brian has committed suicide, so he's no longer here. But at the time, we didn't know that, and I just remember kind of saying like, "Hey, people still get their day in court,
It's
even if
true.
we all have our assumptions." I think it's important to kind of still remember that because what if that fluke circumstance, it just looks, you look really guilty, but in truth, you're not, and that's just
Yeah.
really important to kind of remember. But it's something that sticks out in my mind. And obviously now, I
Yeah.
think technically he's still innocent, but him being passed, I think we can kind of say that, yeah, he did this.
Yeah, I think you're right. And for those who don't know or who weren't listening to the show at the time, we did do an NMR episode, very quick kind of recap about what was going on with that case. To Darren's point, because there was nothing adjudicated yet, we never took on the case here on the show. We
Right.
don't typically do that. We want to make sure everyone gets their due diligence, and frankly, we don't get in any kind of legal trouble by assuming anything. We never want to do that anyway. So that's why we never did the case. And yeah, we assumed eventually there would be something like this from Netflix or another
Yeah.
network. So that's why. So I will link that in our show notes, by the way, if you want to go back and just, I'm curious just to hear like what our thoughts were back then, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, me
Um,
too. Although I
yeah,
feel like my thoughts haven't changed much. I mean, what I learned in this doc were certainly details that I
right.
had forgotten about. But my opinion of the case has not
Yeah,
changed.
same. My opinion hasn't changed, but there's new information I would say that really kind of shocked me in this
Yeah, that I
case.
certainly forgot about. So this documentary is 3 parts. It's pretty digestible. Each episode is about 40 minutes. It's the OJ doc, every episode was over an hour. So high details to cover. This sort of covers every single episode, sort of covers a different aspect of the case. The first episode was just really about like we bought a van. It was their van life, them setting everything up. And in the
Right.
second episode, Gabby goes missing. And then in the third episode, we learn about a very interesting letter that Brian's mother had written him, and we kind of learn about the end of this case. But
Which
we
I
want,
was one of those things I didn't know about. Also, I wanted to tell you guys about an awesome new small business that's selling all kinds of amazing soaps and lotions and even lip balms. The company is called barebearsoapworks.com. That's BAREBEAR. And now more than ever, it's important that we support small businesses, which is what Bear Bear is. We all know how important buying quality products from a small business is compared to something like Walmart or Amazon, right? And I actually know the guy that runs this. His name's Josh. He's a good friend of mine. And I asked him who buy these products exactly. And they look tailored for men, maybe like the branding is very kind of masculine. But he said that actually more women are purchasing these products because they prefer these kinds of scents over maybe like the flowery or fruity stuff that most of these big stores carry, which I thought was shocking. Is that true, ladies? I had no idea about that. So if you're buying for yourself or your partner or a friend, there's definitely something at Bear Bear Soapworks for you. Now, Josh sent me a couple of things. I got a couple bars of soap and a thing of body butter and lip balm. Let me tell you something. I'm very particular about these types of products. Once I found something that I like, I don't go away from it. But I wanted to give this a try because I love supporting small businesses, especially if I know the person that's doing them. Also, I'll tell you, some big name companies have sent us stuff to endorse and we've rejected it because I just didn't like it. I love Bear products, and I'm not exaggerating. The soaps felt amazing. The lotion literally felt like like butter. It's called body butter for a reason. They're literally like the best smells I've ever smelled. Josh sent me an Aspen Lake and a Forest Fire scent soap, which were, I'm not exaggerating, the best smells I've ever smelled. I'm so in love with them. The body butter is called Skinny Dip. Who doesn't love to do that? My favorite product that he sent me though was this hemp lip balm. It smelled so good. It kept my lips hydrated to just the right amount without feeling greasy. That's a really important thing. I don't like feeling like I got, greasy lips. I'm 100% honest, guys. I really do love these products, and you can love them too because Josh at Bear has a special discount code just for you guys listening. Can you hear my cat screaming? Starting today, you can get 10% off any order of your products by going to bearbearsoapworks.com and using code SHAKEN at checkout. That's BAREBEAR soapworks.com for 10% off your entire order.
So just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a timeline of this whole Gabby Petito thing for those who are just need a little bit of a refresher. So in June of 2021, 3.5 years ago, Gabby Petito, who was 22 years old at the time, a Long Island girly, a travel blogger. She quits her she quits her job, excuse me, to become a travel blogger. And she embarks on a cross country road trip with her fiance, Brian Laundrie, in a converted van that they bought, documenting their travels on social media. I kind of just forgot how young. I mean, I knew Gabby was young when she died, but that they were like engaged for a year before they even
Yeah.
went out to go do this van life thing. For some reason, I had kind of coagulated that timeline, thinking that they had done it during this van trip, but I think they
Yeah,
were
me
just like
too.
out in the woods or whatever. It's just like crazy to think about.
It's true. And one of the great things about first of all, by the way, I'll just say, and I want to know what you think, Daryn. I think this documentary was really well done.
Yes,
I think it was a great, straight to the point, not a ton
covered
of
everything.
opinion, covered every part of it. So very well done, Netflix and whatever production company. But one of the things that this first episode I think did a really good job of was, and to your point here, is just highlighting how young and like innocent, not
Yeah,
even just Gabby,
both of them, both of
but
them.
Brian, like, yeah, like my God, like I remember, I kind of forgot, like I knew she was young, but like I remember like myself being 22. I I can't imagine like being engaged, and maybe a road trip would have been something, but certainly I don't think like buying or renting or buying a van and living in it across the country. It's just a lot of gigantic life decisions happening very early in life, and we've talked about that a lot on the show as well, to various degrees of severity, frankly, in these cases, and some young people that have made big choices. And generally speaking, and I hate to say this, but it just seems like generally speaking, these kind of big decisions this day and age, this early, are usually red flags about mental health, relationship status. And of course, that's not everybody, but you just see it and you think, and we hear from her mom who's had the same kind of concerns I think that we're expressing here. So I think that first episode, the Netflix episode, did a great job of that.
Yes, certainly. I think people are getting married later in life, but I definitely think like they didn't really know each other that well. And obviously, as they're interviewing Gabby's friends, you kind of see that there was a lot of red flags even before they went out
Yeah,
into
true.
doing this van life thing. And I remember at the time, people wondering why no one really noticed this or did anything about it. How did the parents not see that this guy was abusive, or how did the best friend
Right.
not stop her from going out? And obviously, I think they're thinking the same thing at that time. Like, how could you not be like, how did I miss this? Did something happen? But as you can see through these text exchanges, she's only giving them, she's a full-blown
Her
adult. Like,
perspective, yeah.
if you want to be in this situation, there's only so much that parents and friends can really do, at the end of the
Yeah,
day. And it's
100%.
really sad because there's so many warning signs here with this case
It's true.
that
Oh, sorry.
no, it's just like that. It seems so tragic in hindsight. It's
Yeah.
certainly during the time, but especially in hindsight.
Yeah, to your point, in fact, one of the first things in the episode, which I was really surprised by, was Gabby's mom describing when Gabby like introduced Brian to her, and she says like, he seemed like a nice guy. And I thought it was like really interesting. Darren's brought Snoopy onto the show, her new dog. Go ahead, Darren. Go do a little show and tell.
She's curious. She just wants to
Yeah.
be in the
Let's see her
mix,
cute little face.
in the
Oh,
folds.
such
She
a
wants to be in
sweetie.
the folds.
Love
Yeah.
it. But you know, hearing her mom after the fact, who now knows, of course, that Brian was involved at the very least and probably did this, to hear her say, you know, he seemed like a nice guy, like that's a bold statement. And I think goes to show like at that time there weren't signs and maybe there weren't even reasons to believe of it, anything. But at some
Well,
point it changed, you
and
know.
obviously things can change. I mean, anyone
Right.
can seem so charming and amazing. You know, they described how kind of much older he looked than
Yeah,
look at
right.
my girl.
I
How
know,
much older
licking the
he
microphone.
looked than the rest of them. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I definitely think the demons can come out as soon as you have someone's guard down and they have already trusted you and they're comfortable with it. So I think that's definitely what happened here. A lot of
Yeah.
dark things that we were not, you know, that didn't manifest until they had been together for quite some time.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, a few years of a relationship at that age is kind of a long time, you know,
Yeah.
like to that
Absolutely.
you know, you're in your late 20s. So August 12th, 2021, police in Moab, Utah, which is where this takes it takes
Mo-
place all over the country, but it does take place in Moab, Utah, which is a gorgeous
Yeah.
place. Respond to a domestic dispute between Gabby and Brian. This is the video that everyone saw.
Yeah.
Officers separate them for the night but do not press charges. Body cam footage later shows a visibly upset Gabby. So you see them on the side of the road. Someone had called in that a guy was slapping this girl. Guy was slapping this girl. They run into the van and they had run over the curb or something and the police had stopped them and dropped them off. Questioned them.
Yeah.
Thoughts on this video? Can we just talk about this like body
Yeah.
cam video? They definitely re-show it a lot. I did not know that they forced them to separate, or at
I
least
didn't know that either.
suggested that they separated. And I didn't know Brian got a domestic violence hotel room and she got the van. Um, all I kept thinking,
Because
well, because
they
she
they
was the
assessed that she was
perpetrator.
the aggressor, right?
And obviously hindsight's 2020, but all I kept thinking about in this time period, just the way that Brian's being like, she's crazy and like making fun of her with the police in a way,
I know. I
you
saw,
know,
yeah.
and like all she needs to do is just take a hot shower, like women are crazy. But watching her compared to him, he was calm. He was, you know, it like disgusts me
I
about how
know.
much women aren't really like
Yeah.
and granted she didn't do anything to help herself, she didn't ask for help, obviously she was so manipulated by him, so scared for her life probably that. And you know another
Yeah.
thing I kept thinking, and I hate to say it, I just kept thinking what a loser he is, like he's probably a short unattractive fucking person, like this man is going to take it out on a girl like that and then pretend. I could just like he looked pathetic to me, that's all, like I was just angry.
Yeah, that's a great, you know, you're speaking my mind as well. And I think this has been one of the biggest controversies from this whole case from start to finish was
What did the cops
the
do wrong
police
here?
response. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know, like you just said that they were separated either, you know, I think I forget who exactly mentions it in the documentary, but you know, someone makes the point that they take Brian, a man who at the very least participated in some domestic violence here because she had marks on
Because she's
her,
got marks, right?
to a shelter for what you know, not necessarily only women, but majority of those people I'm assuming would be women, as this person on the documentary says. And for her to take the van, you know, it's just it. You don't know where it goes wrong. I'll be honest. When I was watching it, I was like, okay, let me like analyze what is happening here. I know in advance that there's drama and controversy. Halfway through this, I'm like, okay, the officer is going through the right kind of questions, but I didn't realize till they started to separate them. I'm like, wait, what? Why would they let him go to the hotel? Why is she in the van?
But it was so weird because they were like the cops came up to her and were like, he's trying to work it out so that way you get to keep the van. And I was like, is that what she wants? Does she even know that
Yeah,
it's an
why is no one
option that she
asking
can
her
separate
that?
her?
Yeah.
Why is no one even doing that? All she wants to do is call her mom. You know,
Which I don't think they ended up
she
doing
didn't seem
until later.
angry. She seemed so scared. And by the way, the witness called in saying that she
That's
saw
what I was
the
just gonna say.
guy
Yes.
slap the girl.
Right. So why would
Like,
the officers then assess it in a different scenario? It's just that is a very strange the way that unfolded and when you look back, like almost if you watch that scene listen to what we're saying now and then watch it again, it's shocking, actually.
And you hear the woman say, like, I'd rather be dinged for something I did than something I didn't do,
That's true.
which I do appreciate. Obviously
Yeah.
there was something to be done there, but this also begs the question, just to play a little bit of devil's advocate, of reminding me of like, how much training do police officers have to handle something like this? How are
Hmm.
they going to know if it's just a really shitty incident that happened between two people and people made mistakes and it'll never happen again,
Well,
or an ongoing thing, or drug fueled, or if this is something that both of them don't want, if both of them aren't complaining necessarily about what's going on. So it's like,
and
what's
you
the obligation of the police? I don't know.
100%. And you hear the officer shockingly say, well, so how do you want to handle this? Because on one hand, it could go like this, but on the other hand, it could go, the person goes back to the aggressor,
Which is what
which would have been
happened.
Brian, which I don't know in that case why then they changed their minds. And the aggressor ends up murdering the other person. You hear the police officer in his vehicle say this. So if that's where his mind is, then why is Brian going to a hotel room and she's left in a van to go take a shower in a public park? None of that makes any sense to me. That being said, shout out to hot showers because for me they do kind of
Well,
reset
they do.
things
They
in a
do
lot of
definitely.
ways.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, and let's be frank, they told them, which was a good piece of advice, cool off. Don't reach out to each other
Yeah, that's
tonight.
true.
But
Yeah.
I knew immediately as soon as the officer said that, knowing these people who are so bad for each other and he is manipulating her in a way that she needs him, that she feels like she's bringing out this pain for him, that they
Hmm.
were going to reach out and get connected
Oh,
that night.
100%. You know that type of
you just
person.
so saw that coming.
Yeah, of
So
course.
August 24th, 2021, Gabby is last seen alive in public at a hotel in Salt Lake City, Utah with Brian. The last footage they have is them going to a Whole Foods that
Right.
day. So this is sort of the timeline that we're dealing with. It's interesting because they documented their lives. And one of the reasons that they said was the motive of this is that Brian really did not want Gabby to be doing this, did not want her to be documenting every little thing. And Gabby's friend surmises,
Rose?
as
Yeah.
Rose, who which I
We
surmise
love
accurate,
her.
I love her, which I surmise accurately as well, is he didn't want the camera picking up on him treating her poorly. Because imagine the
Yeah.
comments of outsiders being like, "Hey, this
Hey,
isn't
this looks a little
this isn't
odd.
great. This isn't great."
I agree with that. I will say I don't know. You have to wonder if I think this is like something that we should really kind of break down and think about with this case. Daryn disappeared, but she's just looking for Snoopy, it looks like, for those
I'm
watching
moving
on
a
Patreon or
cord out of
YouTube.
her mouth. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay, just for anyone watching. Um, you do have to sort of break down whether Brian is aware of his manipulation or is he not aware? Because one of the things that is very clear here is that he has a dependent attachment to her and
Yes.
an insecurity,
Codependency beyond.
codependency like you've never seen. He is participating in some sort of coercive control. And shout out to our
Yes.
friend Laura Richards from Crime Analyst Podcast and many other true crime projects who helped us learn about coercive control during the Dirty John days many years ago. But is Brian aware that he is manipulating and has this coercive control over Gabby? Or is he just going about his life in an insecure way about himself and letting that motivate every decision to isolate her so that only she can be interested in him? Because the only people, and let me rephrase this, you would think that the only people that are interested in doing that are people that are so insecure with their own happiness, like they cannot simply live without this other person as their partner, are the ones doing this. And then you have to think, well, why are you insecure? Is it your looks? Is it whatever? Like, are you scared to be alone? I mean, we can break down the
Yeah,
psychoanalysis of this
I mean, I
another
certainly
time.
think we see through the evidence of his drawings and this and that he had a very dark,
Exactly.
at least, thought process. I would go out on a limb, although
Right.
I don't know. I don't think he's aware of him being, I think
I don't
those
either,
people tend to
unfortunately.
not turn inward and therefore blame everything on themselves. I'm sure he absolutely believed that Gabby was doing all of these things
Yeah.
to him,
Yeah.
hanging out with her friends, doing this, doing that, because he couldn't sit with himself. He probably couldn't be uncomfortable. He was very insecure for all these reasons.
Yeah.
she's eating a notebook now. I just think that she's eating a notebook. I do think that he probably wasn't. When I say wasn't aware, I don't necessarily mean that it's not his responsibility. I just don't think that you can be aware in the throes of rage and codependency of
Right, of
what
course.
you're doing, you know?
Of course, and I would add to this that again, they are 22 whatever years old, like, I doubt that they're even checking in on their mental health in that way. I mean, one of
He
the
believes that she is existing for him. That's
right,
where he's at.
exactly. And one of the other things before we move on too in this from this first episode, one of the other things that really stood out to me is that they both seem so very lost.
Yeah.
You don't typically just want to pack up and leave your family. Like Gabby did this in a matter of a day, it sounds like in this. She asked her mom and the next day she was gone. That to me signals some sort of not trauma, I would say, but it signals some kind of like frustration or disinterest even in your surroundings. And I think there's something to be said about that. Now, what that is or how she got there, Gabby and even Brian, nobody really knows except those closest to her. But when you put all that together from a psychological standpoint, the isolation, the disinterest in your current situation, wanting to go on a road trip and be isolated with your partner, I mean, those aren't typical things that happen in someone's life. So,
Unfortunately, like the way that it was almost a perfect storm of isolation because especially when you're on
right,
the road, Brian could really learn to isolate her. He had already sort of
totally.
isolated her even before they left. And then I'm sure it was one of those things where it's like, well, of course we should just be together. We're only happy when we're together. And you start to think that
Yeah,
you're walking on eggshells for your partner because you believe that their happiness is dependent on whether you're acting correctly. So of
right,
course she was going
exactly.
to be manipulated into doing all of these things, and as a parent, I sort of felt for her parents because if you push too hard, you're going to push
Totally.
them right there. What
Right.
I think is interesting is it didn't obviously stop Gabby from wanting to talk to her mother at least a bunch, but
Yeah,
also
true.
how I didn't realize like how weird Brian's mother comes
Family.
across.
Oh, I
Yeah.
know. Yeah, let's get to some of that here as well. So, moving into the
Yeah.
end of August of 2021 here, Gabby's last known communication with her family occurs. This was on August 25th, 2021. She texts her mother while she's in Grand Teton National Park, Wyoming.
Yep.
Um, 5 days later, Gabby's family receives a final text from her phone saying no service in Yosemite, and her family later believes that the message was not sent by her. We learn in the documentary from uh, an FBI agent who I'm obsessed with, Loretta Bush.
Yeah.
She had like a sleeve of tattoos, and at the end, you
Yeah.
kind of see her get emotional. I loved her. I want to connect with her so badly. Loretta Bush, if you are listening to this episode, please come on and talk to us. You seemed so fascinating. But this FBI agent later determined that based on cell phone pinging, based on when they expected Gabby to have been tragically murdered, it was likely or maybe not even likely. It was determined that Brian was using both devices to say things like this.
Yes, and on that same text, I believe it says, "Can you help Stan? I'm not
That's right.
receiving anything." And Stan was Gabby's grandfather. And what was interesting about that text that her family had noticed was that she didn't
Why
ever
would she
call him
call
by
him
his first
Stan?
name. She
Yeah.
called him, unless that's something you do. I mean, like I used to call my grandfather Morty sometimes, just because Morton is such a good name. But like whatever it was, whatever I call him would have been consistent, certainly with text messaging my family. And so the fact that they said Stan, so the FBI kind of later determined that, yeah, Brian was just sitting there with the phones, instantly
And
contacting back and forth, which is
m-
crazy.
my guess is that Stan, her grandfather, is messaging and calling and like trying to get a hold of her or something. And I'm wondering if Brian even knows that that's her grandfather. I mean, I don't think she'd
I'm
have
sure.
Stan in her phone,
I'm
but
sure because they had
okay.
been, engaged prior and obviously like,
Yeah, that's
the
true.
families had sort of
Right.
intertwined at least a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So moving on here, September 1st, we're now into tragically the final days of this. September 1st, Brian Laundrie returns home to his parents' home in Northport, Florida, but alone in the van that he and Gabby had been traveling in. Now, this is conflicting statements, and oh my God, I love this part because the um the phone calls between the police departments in New York and And Northport, Florida, Northport's like, they're not the parents aren't
Yeah.
cooperating.
Like this is
And
just what it is. Yeah.
and New York is like, don't you think it's a little sus that, this
They're
woman
like, he
is
said
not
he
with
flew
them?
home.
And he said he flew home and the van's parked out front. And the guy's like, well, of course it's
That is
sussy.
weird. Yeah.
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 I'm like, come on, guys. But it's just like, not, listen, by no means is then YPD perfect, of course. But it's just such a great representation of New Yorkers trying to get shit done. And they're like, what
But
are you
it
fucking talking
but
about?
it also shows that like, I sort of understand that like if you want to sort of disappear, especially when you're an adult and the family doesn't want to cooperate,
Yeah.
barring her murder, I mean like you can kind of do that. You kind of
Yeah, of
have
course
that
you
right. And
can.
so the
No, it's
police are
true.
like, what are we to do here? Do we have probable cause to like, go
Yeah.
search their house? Like, do they have a
Yeah.
warrant? Like none of, so it's just such a tough, it's so
Yeah, it
tough.
is. It's a tough call, but it's funny because the woman on the phone from New York was like, "Well, actually, we have enough, but let me get my supervisor." And I loved it because to
Yeah.
me, it sounded like she was making sure she got that information on the record. Like she knew that that phone call was
Yes.
getting recorded, and she was like, "I'm not letting you off the hook. And by the way, I'm also going to escalate this to my supervisor."
Right.
And by the way, she was being extremely respectful and professional. It's not like she was trying to cause a problem, this officer. But I think that I got the sense that she was like, in the event that this obvious thing that is happening becomes
Yeah.
even more obvious, I want to be on the record as someone who was making a point
And
about it.
important to state, Brian's family has not been charged.
Yeah, good
Um,
call. Yep, no one
so
has.
but I will say watching the video of them literally being so unhelpful, it's like
Oh my
people have never looked
God.
guiltier than when they do that. That's all I'm
Oh
gonna
my
say.
God.
You just look sussy when you do something like that.
And you know what? I will say this: as all of this was unfolding, look, we all were living our lives. Were we glued to the screen? Yeah, some of us were, but
Yes.
even still, we don't see those kind of intricacies. So to see the body cam footage
Yes.
without edits for minutes at a time, and the conversation with the Laundry family, and you start to piece this 3.5-year-old puzzle together, it's almost even more shocking the way this stuff has unfolded.
Right. It really
So
is.
take it away.
So
There's still some more stuff to get to
basically,
here.
10 days later, September 11th, 2021, Gabby's family reports her missing after not hearing from her for days. Authorities begin an investigation. Now, obviously, she's traveling across the country. It wasn't that uncommon for them to not necessarily hear from them with a few days. So by the time she
Right.
becomes completely unresponsive, the parents become unresponsive and saying, like, hey, have you heard from Gabby? They're not even answering back, which is also nuts.
It's insane.
This is your daughter-in-law. You're not going to respond back. Like, are you idiots?
And here's, well, I think we now know based on the phone records that they knew exactly what happened,
They knew
but
exactly what was up.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what was also interesting, this is another example of what I was just talking about, like putting it all together in a way that we couldn't at the time. We find out 10 days later, September 11th, Gabby's family is reporting her missing, but they're unaware that Brian is home
Is home.
with the family.
They're completely unaware.
Can you and so
They learned like on the air that he was like home
yeah,
and, someone's like
exactly.
being
Yeah.
interviewed. So 6 days after that, very
Just
interesting
what the
here,
fuck?
September 17th, Brian's parents report him missing,
Which
saying
is
he
like what?
saying he left for a hike on September 14th and never returned, and a large-scale manhunt begins.
And remember this, so he goes missing. They don't know where
He goes
he is.
hiking. Well, he goes hiking. He says he's going hiking, which is not
To
unnormal
them, right?
to them. And
FBI
then
has no awareness of where he is, and this is after days, maybe even weeks of cameras planted outside of this family's home. So how in the fuck did the cameras or the FBI end up letting him quote unquote go? We later learn in the documentary the sister thinks that the FBI thought that it was his mom that left in the middle or whenever he ended up leaving, but it
same
was
build,
actually
right?
Brian. Yeah, with the same build text exchanges, which I don't know. To me, I'm not saying it's not what happened. I'm just like I want to like look into that. I want to know exactly what the FBI like were they tracking who was coming and going in that house?
Right.
Do they have a right to do that when no one's been charged? I don't
Listen,
know.
these are two engaged people, young people, and the parents aren't communicating with each other at all.
Yeah, not a thing.
Someone did something. Someone did something.
The
So
sister claimed that the parents weren't even communicating with her, although it looks like they actually may have been. So
yeah,
that's
they all
another.
went camping together. So it
Oh,
just
right.
didn't
They
make
went
any
camping.
sense.
Right.
So September 19th, 2 days later, in 2021, Gabby's remains, 2 days after Brian is reported missing, Gabby's remains are found in Wyoming's Bridger Teton National Forest. And the autopsy confirmed she was strangled to death. Really interesting because other van life people had actually
That's right.
kind
The
of come
Bethune
together. The
video.
police sort of asked the public to come together on this. And the van life people had reported in their videos when they looked back at this time, seeing Gabby's van, and that kind of gave them a
Hmm.
proper radius for the search. And they found her in the fetal position. And she had been obviously there for a few days, a
About a
while.
week or something.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, they didn't find her until September 19th.
Hmm.
The last known record we have of her is
Oh,
like
that's right. Yeah.
August 24th, and potentially those text messages on the 30th, but they don't even think they were sent by them. So just, she was just left there like trash. I mean, it was like, it's just horrible.
Yeah, they say that in that exact word, unfortunately, which is really crazy. They also realize, I think, in that moment, at least one of the FBI agents, oh my God, FBI agent Kyle from the documentary, love
Yeah.
him.
Oh,
So cute.
okay. Oh,
I'm like, so cute, and you're an FBI agent that knows how to solve crimes. I'm very interested in you.
you're into
So,
that. Yeah.
so Kyle, if you're listening, hit me up in my DMs, or become a sussy radish. Anyway, yeah, he's mentioning that it looks like the crime scene is staged or that she has been brought there. There's like a some sort of mark of a fire, but there's
Yeah.
no
Didn't
really
really.
connection to that.
Her shoes are
Yeah,
off.
that's right. Her shoes are off.
The autopsy did confirm she was strangled to death. So
Right.
again, that
And had
points
blunt force trauma, right?
and had blunt force trauma. That's correct.
Yeah, so yeah, not to go back to the dad, but before we move into the final parts of this, one of the things that also stuck out to me was what appeared to be video of Brian's dad in the midst of Gabby missing, mowing the lawn.
Yeah, just like a day.
I
I don't know if
just
that's just I mean, you could see the reporters and all the people taking photos of him right
asking
2 feet.
shouting questions at him
I
because he's
imagine you're
like,
just trying to pretend that everything is good, and it's just kind of
yeah,
like your son's missing too, and you're just like mowing the
the
lawn, you
lawn.
fucking weirdos.
Yeah, it was all very, very unsettling. So tragically, Gabby was, of course, found, as Daryn just
Yeah.
mentioned. At some point, it's unclear to me how they did this. They were somehow able to take evidence or enter the laundry home at this point. I'm assuming because they can now make a case that Brian is a suspect. I would imagine Brian's missing, or yeah, gone, of course, at this point. Let's talk about the note that they found from his mother.
Burn
The
after reading.
but
Yes.
yes, Christopher, whatever laundry, burn after reading, she writes. Um, I don't know if this was the whole note, but I did write out the excerpt that they mention, at least in this document or in this documentary. I'm going to read it, and then Daryn, I would love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah.
Which is I forget her name, but it's Brian's mom, and she writes, "You are my boy. Nothing you can make, nothing can make me stop loving you. Nothing will or could ever divide us, no matter what we do. If you're in jail, I will bake a cake with a file in it. If you need to dispose of a body, I will show up with a shovel and garbage bags." End
Yeah.
quote. And I had not heard about her note. I had always heard about Brian's notes, which we'll get to in a moment, where that he took with him. No idea that she wrote a note. What was I mean, did you know about this? And if not, or if so, what was your reaction seeing it in this documentary?
I mean, I thought it was like insane. I understand a mother's love. You love your kid unconditionally. Doesn't mean
Of
you like the kid.
course.
But to put in a letter that like I'll bake a cake with a file in it, like just really, it's one thing to be like, I do anything for you. If you ever need anything, I'm here for you.
Of
Never be afraid to
course.
be who you are. That's a perfectly fine letter, even if you know your son was a murderer. Come talk to us.
Sure.
Like whatever. But I'll bring a shovel to help you bury the body. It's like, what?
And the
And they had
first
mentioned, and sorry, let me just say this one last
No, go
thing. They
ahead.
had mentioned that, she had never really taken interest, the mother had never
I
really
was just
taken
gonna
interest
say
in
that.
Gabby, that she had only really been concerned about herself, was such a narcissist, how Brian was giving her attention, all these things. So she seems a little
Yeah, and
not
listen,
well.
Yeah, I mean, I was listen in those early in the first part of that episode where they were highlighting her awkwardness, you could say, with Gabby. I'm talking about Brian's mom here. I was like, okay, I get it. That's a perspective. Family dynamics, especially with young couples, I've noticed in my own life, can be touch and go. Let's put it that way.
Right.
I didn't put a lot of emphasis in it because I thought that could really be editorialized one way or the other, depending on whose
Sure.
perspective it is. But to know then by the end of the end of the series that she wrote this note, it just really colors everything in a whole different light. And then you find out, we found out
Also, I love
through,
that he didn't burn it.
yeah, didn't burn it, left it at home, and then we find out eventually like all the different phone calls that were made. So
Yeah.
we find out that um, essentially shortly after Gabby becomes essentially her digital footprint stops, right? Like she's using her phone, she's using her computer, she's moving files. There's a point in time where her footprint stops. And directly after that is when Brian calls home to his mom, not
So
his
like for like
dad,
55-minute
for a 55
conversations.
minute
Yeah.
conversation that's followed by several phone calls to
To a
lawyers.
lawyer's.
Well, there you go. I think we've got it all
And I
figured
think
out at
they
this
put
point.
like a $25,000 retainer on for a lawyer. And as someone said in the doc, you don't put that much down for a lawyer unless
A
it's a
traffic
pretty,
violation, right?
pretty big crime.
Right.
So just, just come here, come here. Just very,
Very
just very
obvious,
interesting
in my
how
opinion.
freaking sussy this family was
Right,
at the
right.
time.
So then, if to not to add even more sussiness to this family, so Brian goes on this hike, right? So the police show up. Where's Brian? Oh, he went on a hike. We know that he was going to be gone. They find the family Mustang sitting at a park. I think it gets called in. Someone's like, "Hey, this car's been here for a couple of days. It's near
Yeah.
where Brian likes to hike." A gigantic, what was it, like a 20,000 square acre manhunt
Yeah.
begins to look for him. They're looking everywhere. They were talking about fucking crocodiles eating dogs and shit.
No, they're
There's
everywhere over this thing.
yeah, there's men searching, there's drones, there's men up to their waist in like swamp water. Could never be me, just to be
No,
clear. Could never
no.
be me. Not in crocodile land.
Also, I'm surprised he was missing for 37 days because that's what they said that he was missing for. And again, that's just a very long time. I forgot that it was that long.
Yeah, I don't remember it being that long. So eventually, Brian's parents join in on the search. And when they do, they go to the same exact spot where the car was parked. And within 1 hour,
And within 1 mile of where the
and
car is
within
parked,
1 mile of where the car is parked,
they find
they
him.
find his
Oh,
skeletal remains. Right. Which
wide
let's be
manhunt
fair.
with thousands of people. Put the parents on in 45
That's what
minutes.
I'm
We're good.
saying. And I don't want to be judgmental towards a search. I mean, my God, searching for a missing person, even if it is Brian Laundrie, who may have killed Gabby Petito at this point, search, as we know over the years, searches are never easy. But how on earth could they have missed 1 mile away from the car? That's shocking to me.
Well,
But
I don't know if it says something about the parents knowing exactly where it is. It seems like they could have maybe helped them.
right, right, right.
Who knows what
Or
they
maybe
knew?
he, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Who
So,
knows?
as we mentioned, his skeletal remains are discovered in this area. A notebook is found nearby, which was waterproof, which contained a confession to Gabby's murder, and his death is ruled a suicide. In
Well,
the
he confessed to it,
I
but
was just gonna say, yeah.
he spins it. Go ahead. Yeah.
I know I was gonna say, yeah. He spins it to make it seem like there was some sort. Well, let's be clear. Let's just be clear. We don't know exactly what happened, and they say
No,
that
we
in this
don't.
documentary. We don't know what exactly
Except the
happened to
autopsy
Gabby.
report says she was strangled to death and had blunt force trauma. But in theory, this could match up. This story could
It
match
could.
up.
It could match up. But when you hear all of his explanations, which is that, oh, he looked her behind and suddenly she's moaning in pain and he doesn't know
Pulls her out of the
why.
water and she can't explain what's in pain.
So he
And
just had to kill her.
all she wants is the pain to stop. And so he killed her to be merciful.
Yeah, to be merciful. Um, Hard to believe, sounds like a psychopath. I don't believe
Pretty,
it for a minute.
pretty fucking hard to believe. Got to be honest with you, but
Exactly.
not implausible. But yeah,
And I think it's worth noting that his skeletal remains are discovered, which means that, and by the way, he had died by a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
Correct.
So, and to find his skeletal remains, according to somebody in this documentary, means that he had been there for quite some time.
We don't know this, but I feel like that's one of the reasons, he went hiking and then didn't come
Right.
back. And then, his
Yeah,
family
of course.
reported it days later and he'd been sitting there for a while. So yeah.
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 So that's the end, tragically, of this story. These two young people who 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 have found themselves in that position, who maybe did not have to go through this. I mean, I think a big question that came across my mind by the end of this documentary, Daryn, is was Brian always going to be a killer? Was he going to kill Gabby? Was this premeditated? Probably
Probably
not.
not. Probably not. Probably not. But
But it
in heat
is
of the moment, obviously
right,
he had issues. The drawings that were later released that he had done, the
right,
things that
right,
he said and texted Gabby. I mean,
right.
you know, I,
Yeah.
I, I don't think it was premeditated, but I certainly think he was prone to doing these things. Very curious to see what Brian's family actually knows about him.
Yeah, or if they'll ever talk, by the way, because I'm
Probably not.
assuming they probably won't. But nonetheless, the end of this documentary notes that well, first before we get to that, well, let's talk about this. The end of the documentary notes that Gabby's family did file a lawsuit against the Laundries for
In
wrongful
2022.
death. Yep,
Hmm.
in 2022, which I didn't know about. I actually didn't realize that.
It's just what
And
happened in the OJ trial too.
I was just gonna
Remember that,
say,
yeah,
very
they sued
similar
him for,
situation. Yeah.
yeah, of which he was
Um,
found guilty in that, and here they had a settlement. Yeah.
exactly. And then they settled with the Laundries in 2024, so just last year, which is surprising that I never even really heard about that.
Yeah.
Um, I don't, of course, the settlement never on paper kind of says guilt, but I think that they were not willing to go to a trial here because,
Yeah.
of course, they would have to enter into a discovery phase, which means even more attention, even more revelations, very likely, that would not look good with them, even if they were completely unaware, I'm sure. So hopefully, the settlement in some capacity brought some justice to
Yeah.
Gabby and her family. I will say another really interesting part of this documentary that you don't hear about with this case is that her whole family went back to the location where she was found. And I was crying. I was like, damn, like,
And they could feel her presence and they all came together. And yeah, I thought that was a really special moment because, like,
yeah,
you can, he took everything away from her except, like, kind of
exactly.
her spirit and the family's love for her. And so it was nice
Yeah,
to see that celebrated.
it was. And, I, as I've said before, I have a family member who lost their son. Her son went missing. She spent her life looking for him. I've mentioned it a few times. We will eventually get to that as a case on the show when the time is right. But I've seen that parent's pain, and I
Yeah.
know what that pain looks and sounds and feels like. And so to and especially going back to the location where the body was, I've seen that. That was something recent in my own life that I've experienced. So I do have an empathy for that I think most people may not kind of connect with in the exact same way. And I just thought the family was so fucking strong.
Yeah.
This location wasn't like, you know, a, a a property off the side of the road, or it was like a very, very remote, isolated area that in and
Right.
of itself is kind of tragic to see and feel. You know what I mean? To know that this poor girl's body was left in the middle of nowhere, that
Yeah.
alone
It's
is
really
shocking
horror.
and horrible. Yeah. So I just want to say shout out to the family and the parents, especially, who seemed so loving. Gabby had two step parents as well that seemed just as much of a parent as her biological parents. I mean, you can only hope that that's the case when your parents get a divorce.
Yeah.
The whole family just seemed amazing. So anyway, to wrap this up, they started the Gabby Petito Foundation, Daryn, which is to help people that are
Potential victims of,
victims.
yeah. And they
Exactly.
also were trying to get that bill through. I don't know if it passed, about 11 questions
11
police
questions.
officers can ask a couple or a person in a relationship, in a potential domestic
Yep.
violence situation, in order to gather better information. Just horrible all around. Really just a horrible
Yeah.
case. And I think the big question, which you actually wrote here too, is like, how are the parents just not charged? I mean, I feel like they deliberately
is there not
Like
aiding and
they,
abetting at
yeah, like
some
they aided and
point?
abetted somebody or something. And I guess it hasn't been proven,
Yeah,
because they're now both dead. And maybe it's just, but I just don't understand how,
yeah,
you know. Obviously, I believe that they're, especially after everyone sees this doc, how that family is probably shamed in their
yeah.
community. But yeah,
Yeah,
really
still,
interesting.
as we said, to date, no criminal charges have been filed against any of the Laundries. They are innocent, of course. We have to make sure
Yes.
we say that. But knowing what we know, it's a little bit shocking to know
Yeah.
that. The last thing I'll say is I always want to make sure we say this when we talk about these kind of cases. If you or someone you
Yeah.
know are experiencing something that sounds familiar to this, they do mention a website called wannatalkaboutit.com.
Yeah.
WANNA talkaboutit.com. I'm going to link all this in the show notes just in case someone listening may find it
Smart.
useful. And I love that, these documentaries do that because the truth of the matter is maybe those 11 questions could have saved one or both
Gabby's
of these
life.
people's lives. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and by
True.
the way, Brian is
And
not, I'm not,
Brian's. Yeah.
yeah, I'm not saying Brian, is a victim to any degree at this
No, but
point,
maybe he
but
would have gotten help. Maybe if the
yeah,
signs had been there,
exactly. Yeah.
whatever.
Well, anyway, guys, that is American Murder, Gabby Petito. It's available now on Netflix. Go and watch it. Let us know what you think about it. Hit us up in our show note or in our show notes. Hit us up on Facebook, on Patreon. You can hit us up at J Thrasher and Carpe Daryn on most social media these
Yes.
days. And Daryn, let's get into some lighter topics here as we
Okay.
get into listener shout outs.
Wasn't sure how you were going to answer that.
Yeah, yeah, me
Longtime
either.
listener and friend of the show, Catherine, shared some tough news about a
Yes.
family member in our Facebook group. Catherine, we're sending you and your family well wishes and hope for your family's healing. We both read the messages. You got responses from both of us. We were
Yes.
just shocked, to say the least. We really hope your family is going to be okay through all of this. You always can come to our community and talk about it. And it was so nice that you
Absolutely.
felt comfortable enough to kind of bring that sensitive information to us, because we love you and we're always here for you. Let us know if there's anything we can do.
Yeah, and shout out to like to your point, Daryn, shout out to our community who came to Catherine's uh side to give her well
Yeah,
wishes and we are a community and like we're not a family, of course. We don't all know each other here, but it feels like that. And so yeah, I love when we see other radishes helping other radishes. It's really sweet.
me too.
Yes, and so shout out to Catherine, and we hope you're well. Longtime friend of the show and Patreon radish Philip was so excited about your dog announcement recently, Daryn, that he had shared an
Yes.
update of his own. He and his partner have three cute wiener dogs. So shout out to Lily, Prim, and Cedar, which by the way I
Cedar is a
love.
cute name.
Cedar is a really cute name. And
Yeah.
by the way, Daryn, Philip smartly pointed out, quote, one wiener is never enough for us gays. For us
We
gays.
know it, Philip.
We
We
know
know it.
Philip. As
We know Philip.
gays, we're aware of that. So thank you,
Yes.
Philip, for sharing those cute
No, it was
pictures.
so cute. Great names.
Yes.
And by the way, guys, come over and join the Patreon party. Join us for as little as $5. We're posting pics, videos, polls, you name it. Very cute pics of Snoopy. It's the best place to support Shaken and Disturbed.
And if you would like your name on our new virtual background chalkboard on every single episode of Shaken and Disturbed, you will become a part of Shaken and Disturbed history. Like so many others have, you can join or upgrade to a Sussy Radish tier and your name can be added. We're going to do this every couple weeks. I'll be updating it, making sure the exact Sussy Radishes are on there. Your
Yes.
support of the show helps us pay these bills and keeps new episodes coming every week. So thank you for your support. And by the way, one last thing. I owe some people some shout outs on next week's episode that filled out our poll or
Yes.
our survey recently. So
Let's
apologies
get
for
you.
that. We are sifting through that information now,
He's
but
the worst, people. Again,
I'm
two
the
months since
worst.
my Christmas gift, just
No
saying.
Christmas gift, no shout outs.
Yep.
I'm doing the best I can over here in Pittsburgh. All right. Anyway, we love you guys.
We
As
love
I
you guys.
always
Love you, Johnny
say,
boy.
love you too, Daryn. Take care and brush your hair, Daryn, and everyone listening.
Please be neat and wipe the seat. We'll see you guys
Oh
next
boy.
week.
Bye bye.